right, welcome back. Futures edging higher this morning. Take a look. Dow Industrial's up 30 points. The S&P's up 3 points, and the Nasdaq up 7. Stocks closed in the red yesterday over heightened concerns of slowing global growth and the recent inverted yield curve. This is the Federal Reserve lowers its U.S. economic growth forecast, and it also indicated it will likely not raise interest rates at all this year. In fact, Steve Moore, as you know, incoming nominated Fed governor from President Trump, Steve Moore told the New York Times this week that he wants the Federal Reserve to cut rates immediately. Joining me right now is Mainstay Capital Management CEO and Chief Investment Strategist David Kudla. David, it is always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Do you think the Federal Reserve should start cutting rates?
I think that they're right to be on hold. If we look at where we are right now with the economy, concerns about slowing, it makes sense for them to be on hold for now. Fed funds futures are pricing in a high probability that they'll cut by the end of the year. But certainly patience, as they've talked about, is warranted, and I think that's the appropriate policy for the coming months.
What do you think about that, Steve? Some Fed officials are saying it's too soon to consider cutting U.S. rates at this point.
Which, by the way, your viewers know, because we talked about Robert Kaplan. That's who they quote in the article, is what Robert Kaplan said yesterday.
We said that yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, the key thing is if we get these trade deals done, you're going to see a very good second half, and the Fed, that's when you need to put the Fed on the spot, because they're going to start using that word overheating. They're going to think, they still think prosperity causes inflation. That's why Moore's appointment is so important. Try to challenge that ideology that if you have low unemployment, you're going to get high inflation. It's preposterous. It never works, rarely works in the real world, but that's when the real fight is going to begin, latter part of this year.
But the broader backdrop is slowing, right, David? I mean, you've got Europe lucky to even generate 1% growth this year, China off of the highs, and the U.S. is also seeing a bit of a slowdown from just a year ago. So does that concern you?
Well, I think there's this belief that the U.S. will import a recession, or there's concern about this slowing growth globally, which is true. Europe is in trouble. They're in trouble with their economic growth. They're in trouble with political turmoil. China we might be starting to see signs of recovery, but they've been slowing for a long time. A lot of the world is slowing. There is global growth slowing. Here in the U.S., though, we still have signs. We still have reasonable growth in terms of GDP. If you look at some of the recent numbers, we're a consumer-driven economy. And if we look at recent PMI numbers for services, non-manufacturing index for PMI or ISM, those are reasonably strong numbers, highest numbers we've had in 6 or 8 months. So we actually, when we look at the services part of our economy, we're doing quite well. Consumer confidence, not at an all-time high, but strong. The U.S. economy is really still doing okay.
Emerging markets, they're volatile, but over time they do very well. What's your stance on them now?
Well, we like emerging markets. We like emerging markets certainly better than...
Even with the global economy slowing down?
Yeah, even with the...
Where? Brazil, India, China, which ones?
Well, if we look, we think that there's going to be opportunity in China. We think that we will reach a trade deal here eventually, some kind of deal, where they end up on intellectual property and transfer, intellectual property theft and technology transfer. They'll eventually get to a deal which will be good for China, will be good for the U.S., good for stocks in general. But whatever that deal may be, just getting to a deal. And with the Chinese government is going to stimulate to get growth, to get out of this.
You still like U.S. stocks then?
Yeah, U.S. stocks is still our #1 holding. That's certainly the primary holding, primary allocation for investors.
Not Tesla, though. You've been short Tesla.
Still short Tesla.
David, it's good to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. David Kudla joining us, Mainstay. The president.